Welcome to Small Group Leadership Training. My name is Mike Degree, and I'm a minister with the Broward Church. And today we are talking about developing new small group leaders. And you know, when the topic of developing new leaders comes up, it's hard to broach because it's rare as a leader that when you start a group, and that group comes with a host of co-leaders that are already developed. What's more likely is that when you start a group, that group probably has a couple people who might desire to be developed into leaders. And so it's your job as the leader to help develop them or persuade them. Now, if you're anything like me, it's usually easier to just do the ministry ourselves because developing other leaders, as I'm sure you know, can sometimes be messy. And the reason I say messy is because it takes time to prepare them. It takes time to follow up with them. And as much as we train and trust our people, sometimes we end up having to clean up their mistakes in the process. So, of course, when I mention developing leaders, we could begin to feel uncomfortable. But I will say, even if we're uncomfortable, please do not avoid the work of developing leaders because the long-term result and training others is well worth it in God's kingdom. Now today, I want to talk through like 8 tips to developing new small group leaders. So let's get right to it. The first tip I want to start us off with today is pray for leaders to develop. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this point, but I don't think it's a coincidence that before Jesus gathered a whole repertoire of leaders, you see him in Luke chapter 6, verse 12, spending all night praying to God. I believe Jesus knew that before he was going to effect change on the earth, he was going to have to pray for the people that would help him effect that change. Jesus knew he was going to need clarity and resolve and power before he chose his leaders. So he made it a conviction to get some unhurried time and the quiet to pray. And for us today, just like Jesus, just like he needed some time, we need time with the Father before we give our lives to developing leaders. We cannot underestimate the need for God's influence, his wisdom, his discernment, and choosing new leaders to develop. So my encouragement, before you seek to develop new leaders, pray for those leaders in advance. Second tip, choose them. I know this sounds very obvious, but let's go back to Luke chapter 6. After Jesus spent all night praying to God, here's what verse 13 says. And when day came, he called his disciples and he chose from them 12 whom he named apostles. I'm bringing this passage up because sometimes we figure that if we want people to lead, then they'll just come to us and they'll just ask us to lead. And part of this is true. Sometimes people will come to us, but most of the time, from my experience, people don't just come to you. You have to go to them. You can't wait for them. You have to pursue them. You know, a lot of times, I know I've been guilty of this. I have often said, the reason I don't have any co-leaders is because I'm waiting on quote unquote good leaders. But the reality is, and this might sound a little odd to say, you don't really find good leaders. You help develop good leaders. Good leaders don't just fall out the sky. They are developed in time by God's grace. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying you should be rash and just settle and choose any old type of person, because I'm a big believer in choosing people that have high character and high faith and high humility. But what I am saying is you should not procrastinate or let opportunities pass you by, because if Jesus had to go out and choose new leaders, how much more do you need to go out and do the same? I know this is risky. I know this can be very uncomfortable because we don't want to be rejected, but we have to become comfortable with putting ourselves out there in order that more and more people can be developed as leaders in God's kingdom. So the second tip is choose the new leaders. Third tip, spend time with those leaders. Spend time with them. In John chapter 3, verse 22, the Bible makes an easily overlooked and seemingly mundane statement. Here's what it says. Jesus and his disciples went out into the Judean countryside where he, Jesus, spent some time with them. What Jesus did is really quite simple. He selected just a few people to focus on, and they hung out with him and did ministry alongside of him. When Jesus spent some time with these 12 apprentices, something big happened. The word for spend time in Greek is diatribo. Dia means against and tribo means to rub. So diatribo literally means to rub against or to rub off. It literally means to spend time together rubbing off on each other. You see, what Jesus did was not just about hours and minutes. It was about diatribo. Some of him was rubbing off on his leaders, his disciples, his apprentices. One of the main ways Jesus transformed his followers into people who would impact the world, he just started by simply spending time with them. Jesus was establishing his leadership team based on relationships. He prioritized spending time with the 12 so they could observe and learn and do what he was doing. And you and I can do that today. When we spend enough time with new leaders, we begin to rub off on them and they begin to rub off on us. You know, much of our leadership development today focuses on content and curriculum, which isn't all bad, obviously, because we're recording this video. But Jesus, the best small group leader to ever live, decided that the way this world would be turned upside down is by prioritizing his relationship with the 12, with the men around him. And I truly believe in order for us to have an impact on our leaders and this world around us, all of us need to prioritize spending meaningful time with the leaders that God has placed around us. Let them see how you live out your faith. Let them see how you are with your family. Let them see how you are with the lost. Let them see how you are with the poor. Basically, allow the people you are going to lead to have easy access to your life. And of course, allowing people to have access to your life doesn't happen on accident. You have to decide, along with your leaders, what your relational rhythms will be. How often will you meet? What will the format be? Will you meet weekly or monthly? Will you meet face-to-face over coffee? Will you meet through Zoom? Decide to spend time with someone. Decide to spend time with the people that God has placed around you. Decide to spend time with those leaders. And of course, spending time with those leaders, you're going to have to decide and you have to schedule your relational rhythms. The third tip was spending time with those leaders. The fourth tip is give them a mission. In Mark chapter 3, verse 14, it says, he, Jesus, appointed 12 that they might be with him. We just spoke about being with, spending time. We just spoke about the value of making sure that we have access, give access to people, the people that we're developing. And then it goes on to say that he might send them out to preach and to have authority to drive out demons. The goal of the apprenticeship was that he might send them out so that they would do with others what he had done with them. Jesus' mission with these followers was to get them to the place where they could do what he was doing. Once they could preach and have authority to drive out demons, the apprenticeship was complete. Our leadership development, I believe, should involve the same kind of approach. We should communicate a clear mission to those we are helping to develop. Our expectations should be clear from the start. We should communicate to our leaders that our hope is that they would be sent out to lead their own group, to influence their own people, to impact their own community. We have to vocalize, I believe, this expectation early on and see if they desire that mission. Now, in addition to being clear with your hopes, a question you can ask yourself at some point is, when is your mission with that leader complete? Of course, I'm not saying your friendship should ever be complete. That would be silly. But what I am saying is that you should have a conversation after some time about when both you and your leaders think they are ready to start their own group. Now, getting to that point of having that conversation about transitioning and growing into a new group often takes some time. It takes years sometimes. Leadership development doesn't happen overnight. But once both of you agree that it's time to grow into a new group, it's then that you can begin to offer your blessing and your support and your encouragement. You don't want your leader to just stay stagnant in your group when they can grow and exercise full capacity in their leadership. So free them after you develop them. Now, before we finish this video, I want to offer a few more ways methodical ways that you can try to develop your leaders. Now, you can use this or you can edit this to fit your own personality, your own leadership, but let's walk through it. The first step is I do, you watch, we talk. What that step means is that you as the leader are asking the person you're developing to just watch and observe as you do ministry, just to get it started. As a leader, I've told people before, just observe everything that happens in our small group, and then we'll find a time to meet and discuss what you observed. When I've gotten with a leader, I've asked, what do you think worked? What didn't work? How can we improve? Questions like that. This is basically a method that I've used to help leaders to begin to think like small group leaders. So, I do, you watch, we talk. Another thought is, I do, you help, we talk. In this step of the development, I would begin to include that leader into the small group into the small group meeting. What I mean by that is I would begin to give them opportunities. In this case, I would ask the leader to help, for example, with the good news and the prayer request portion of the meeting. Again, after the meeting, I would make it a point to follow up with the leader to find out how they thought it went. The next step is you do, I help, we talk. And in this step, the leader now transitions to helping me take on most of the responsibilities in the group. I would probably handle the prayer time at the beginning and then begin to slowly release some of the other responsibilities to the leader. Because at this point, they've begun to develop their confidence and they've begun to develop trust within the group, and their opportunities are growing. So I would begin to trust them more and more with more opportunities. The next thought is you do, I watch, we talk. This is kind of coming to the end of the leadership development. And at this point, I'm beginning to hand over all of the responsibilities, not all the meetings, but at least for some of the meetings. I would just sit back and watch them lead, and then we'll be able to find a time to talk more about how they thought it went, and then we'll begin to discuss new ideas. Now, at this level, I would begin, because I am starting to feel confident that I think they're ready. So I'll probably ask them, hey, I think you are ready to lead the group. Do you think you're ready? And at this time, we'll begin to have conversations on what that could look like. Now, of course, all of these tips, they aren't the end all be all. You may be able to find something that fits better with your personality. But I hope that what I'm sharing just can be a starting point for you, or maybe a reminder to you as you begin to develop more and more new leaders that come into your community. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I hope it was helpful, and have an amazing day.